All right, so here's a quick video about Mike Tyson and people saying that this guy is like, the greatest thing ever. You see people have comments where they're like, this guy was, he was a, in his prime was unbeatable. He would never lose a fight had Cus D'Amato not died. If he hadn't left Rooney, he would have, always won every single fight. He's the greatest, blah, 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 blah. I think a lot of that's ridiculous. I think that Mike Tyson, most of his legacy is based off fantasy and not reality, and projection is most of what makes up Mike Tyson. Now, he was a great heavyweight. I think he's probably in the top 10 heavyweights of all time. So I think sometimes hardcore boxing fans, they try to go too far the other way and be like hipsters. I'm not saying he wasn't great, but you're going to have a hard time making me believe a 5'11", 217-pound heavyweight would have beaten every other fighter in history at the time. I think Mike Tyson was great, but I think he had some key flaws. His size, the fact that he's one-dimensional, the fact that he never knocked out anybody after the 8th round. So that just shows you his power was only effective from the first 6 rounds, really. And the longer the fight went, the worse he did. And for a pressure fighter, I didn't like the way that he didn't really work so much on the inside the way guys like Joe Frazier did. To me, Frazier, he was way more active on the inside and had a way heavier work rate. I think Mike Tyson, from a head-to-head standpoint, is a monster, but I think people go too far. Now, from a resume standpoint, I don't see how any person can seriously consider this guy the greatest heavyweight of all time. He simply did not do enough, and in the big fights that he fought versus Evander Holyfield and Lennox Lewis, he didn't win them. I know those fights weren't at his peak, but that's life. And when you look at his career, his run was only a few years, and he never fought another great heavyweight during that period of time, an all-time great heavyweight. I know he fought Larry Holmes, but Larry Holmes was 38 years old, and Larry Holmes was coming out of retirement, so I'm not counting that. I'm talking about an all-time great heavyweight in their prime. I think Mike Tyson is the most overrated boxer of all time. I think that from a casual fan's perspective, they think this guy is arguably the greatest boxer of all time. And to me, he's not even arguably the greatest heavyweight of all time. I think that Mike was great, but I think he had a lot of things working for him. I think he had a very exciting style. I think he captured the fantasies of a lot of people that a guy that small could be beating up people that big. I think that he came in at the right time where television homes were growing a lot more in this country, and the pay-per-view started, it started rising. And I think Don King was a beast as a promoter. He really did a great job pumping this guy up. So, yeah, I think Mike Tyson was a great fighter, but I think he's ridiculously overrated. And I think he's too short and limited to ever be seriously, even if Cus D'Amato never died, which, by the way, Cus D'Amato died when Mike Tyson had 9 fights. So Mike Tyson became world champion even without Cus D'Amato. So I think that's kind of, a little bit of a nonsense excuse. And even if Rooney didn't leave him, I think Mike Tyson always would have ran into some problems. I think that he was kind of, a very reckless person who, listen, the man's a mentally unstable person. And you see that when he handled success, the man he had a lot of personal problems from his marriage, his divorce, going to jail for the rape. I know a lot of people don't think he did the rape, but that's not really my point. He's had a lot of issues. You even just see the way he acts and how quickly he's prone to rage. The man's not a stable person, and you need to be a stable person to have a long career. And I don't think Mike Tyson ever would have had a long career in any era. And even if Cus lived, I think that Cus is a control freak. And Mike Tyson would have left Cus D'Amato the way he left Floyd Patterson. The way Floyd Patterson left Cus D'Amato, because remember, Cus had problems with his fighters. Cus was considered a control freak. So I'm just not buying it. I'm sorry. I even remember back in 10th grade, I had a teacher, and the teacher said that he said this. He said, when I was growing up, the greatest fighter of all time, and now this fighter, the greatest fighter of all time, is now a joke. And I was thinking maybe he was talking about Muhammad Ali, because at this point Muhammad Ali was still living, and I'm thinking maybe he means Muhammad Ali's a joke because of his physical health. He's like Mike Tyson, and I'm like, what? You gotta be kidding me. And we start debating this in the classroom back and forth, and it's like all his arguments are the same nonsensical stuff. Oh, it was a long count with Buster Douglas. Oh, and nobody could beat him in his prime. Everyone's undefeated until they lose. Everyone's in their prime until they lose. And I'm sorry, but when a fighter is 23 years old, is undefeated, is the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, and has never seriously been hurt or dropped, that guy's in his prime. Like, this whole nonsense that Mike Tyson wasn't in his prime versus Buster Douglas, it's complete nonsense. That was his prime. You want to say he wasn't at his best and he wasn't at his most optimal? Okay, fine, but that was prime Mike Tyson. I'm sorry. He lost. Stop making excuses like they always do for every one of his losses and every one of his shortcomings. He's a human being. He got in the ring. He got knocked out. And it wasn't a long count either. I don't want to hear that nonsense. It was a legit count. Buster Douglas was able to get up after 3 seconds. Just stop with that nonsense. So, yeah, Mike Tyson's ridiculously overrated. I think not only is he the most overrated boxer of all time, I think he's the most overrated athlete of all time. Just because the casual fan who doesn't know much about boxing would actually be under the impression that he's possibly the greatest boxer of all time, when in reality, he's not even close to the greatest heavyweight of all time. So, yeah, Mike Tyson, the most overrated boxer of all time.